BlackandWhite.com.
It's the show the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about. It's Black and Right with John Anthony on AM 560, The Answer.
Welcome back to Black and Right on AM 560, The Answer. I'm your host, John Anthony, live in studio with the Bishop of Truth himself, Cesar LaFleur.
Yes, in the house.
Now, I told you guys I had a special guest. One of the things that I'm really trying to do on this show is to really engage and have people who don't think like me, people who don't have the same opinions as I do.
Okay.
Now, to my very far right people, don't get upset with me. I actually, my next guest, I served with this person in the General Assembly, and I'm telling you, we didn't agree probably on 90% of the issues. But one of the things about it, this next guest was somebody that was really good to me, and I've heard we've been talking back and forth pretty much since I left the General Assembly. I want to welcome. I know some of you guys are going to be shocked when I say the name.
I can't wait.
Former Majority Leader of the Democrat Party, Barbara Flynn Currie.
Get out of here.
Welcome to Black and Right.
It's good to be with you. I appreciate the invitation.
I'm so glad.
I don't think we disagreed on everything.
Well, we
certainly did have our disagreements, but I think we worked well together.
I think we did.
And I think one of the things that you did as the only black Republican serving in the Illinois House since the early 1980s was that you did work across party lines, and you didn't come into the job with a whole quiver full of ideological musts.
Yeah, that's true, and I agree.
You were flexible. You were willing to listen to other sides of the argument.
Yeah, and I
give you credit for that.
And I was also able to tell people where I stood, and if they didn't agree, they didn't agree. But we always found a way. So I guess that's where I want to start, because I mean, you've had 30 years in politics. I believe it was 40 years.
40.
When did politics between the parties become so vitriol? And what in your mind can we do to fix that? Just the way how people go back and forth now, and it's so hateful now.
It is, and I don't know what the answer is. I think it starts at the national level, but we certainly have seen the repercussions here in Illinois.
Yeah.
And it used to be, when I first went to Springfield, you couldn't tell who was for gun control or who was for reproductive rights by virtue of the party they belonged to.
Right.
In those days, we had a lot of very moderate Republicans from the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah.
And many of those were pro-choice, and they were not fans of the Second Amendment.
Right.
But we also so downstaters might be for the Second Amendment, more gun rights, and they may have been opposed to reproductive rights, but it didn't cut across party lines. It cut across geography and ideology. I do think part of the problem is that people who were more moderate got pushed out in party primaries, whether Democratic primaries on the left or Republican primaries on the right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of incumbents look over their shoulder and they think, gee, if I cross the line and cross the NRA, I'm gonna develop an opponent in the Republican primary.
Yeah.
And Democrats have the same. If you're not liberal enough, somebody will come and out AOC you.
Right. And especially when you look at, I'm looking at the map as it's drawn here in Illinois. If you're north of I-80, pretty much, you got to be careful what you vote for. If you're especially now, and when you look at DuPage County, I just want to know how were the Democrats able to come in and completely shift and change DuPage County of all places, the county of Pate Phillips and what's the other Crane, Phil Crane. How were they able to come in and do that?
Well, I think partly it's a function of population changes. So I think there was an influx of people into DuPage County who may have had different views from those of the people who were there before them. I think that's part of it. I also think that part of the problem for Republicans in DuPage County was that I remember, for example, well, she may have been in Cook County, but one of our former colleagues who was a Republican and consistently voted against any kind of reasonable gun control.
Yeah.
Well, she was vulnerable to a Democrat in her general election. But I think she voted the way she did because she was fearful that she would draw a primary opponent.
Yeah.
So I think what happened was more and more people decided that the Democrats who cared about things like reasonable gun control were more on their in their line of thinking, more in sync with them than were Republicans who were clinging to an ideology that might have been protected in a primary, but didn't work out so well in a general.
Representative Currie, this is Pastor Cecil LaFleur calling. And first of all, let me just thank you for being here. You're like a legend, hearing your name.
Yeah, right.
Are you shocked?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that you would come on John's show. But no,
Of course I would.
absolutely
Of course
would.
I would.
But you've served for, how long did you serve? 40 years or so?
40 years, yeah.
Okay,
A long
now,
time.
so that's my question. Do you think that term limits is something that we should be thinking about? Do you think it's a healthy thing for someone
Well,
either
let me
state
think.
level or the national level to be in office 40 years?
All right, two things I would say. First of all, we do have term limits. It's called the ballot box. So in the case of representatives, every 2 years you stand for re-election if you want to stand at all. And to me, that is important. I think if you impose term limits, you are denying the voters the opportunity to choose someone of their liking, and you also are, I think, unfortunately, losing some institutional memory among the members of the assembly, whichever assembly it is. There aren't term limits on lobbyists. There aren't term limits on bureaucrats. And I don't know that
Who
I
really
want
run it.
people
Right.
who are making decisions to be dependent on them. There's another point to be made,
Okay.
and that is turnover in the Illinois House, for example, is incredible. It goes at a very great pace. I should have looked at the numbers, but I tell you, when I look at who's in the General Assembly today compared to who was there when I left in 2019,
That's true.
at least 35% of them are newcomers. So the worry that you're going to have all these people staying there year after year after year is just not borne out by the reality.
Yeah. So
That's the way of saying I was an anomaly. Most people don't stay that long.
So what are you doing now? I know you were supposed to come on the show last week, but the grandkids. I'm not going to get in the way of Barbara Flynn Currie's grandkids and Barbara Flynn Currie ever. So, what are you doing now?
That was very kind of you, because it was the first time we'd seen them in a couple of weeks, and it was just around Easter time, so it was wonderful to be able to. We didn't do an egg hunt, but we did just enjoy one another. I'm the chair of the Illinois Pollution Control Board.
Okay.
So we're the ones who do the regulatory and judicial work in the environment. The Illinois Environmental Protection Agency brings enforcement actions. Citizens can bring enforcement actions, and we, the Pollution Control Board, hear them and decide contested cases. We also establish rules that are asked of us by the Illinois General Assembly or the IEPA or ordinary members of the public governing various kinds of pollution. We're just finishing up a year of intensive hearings, hours and hours and hours, on how to prevent coal ash pollution.
Yeah.
So we're hopeful that those rules will go into effect at the end of this month.
Yeah.
And if they do, then I think we're on a path to make sure that people are not suffering the ill effects of coal ash residuals in the groundwater and the possibility of spillage into our lakes and streams.
Wow. If you're just joining us, we're talking to the former number 2 in command of the Illinois House of Representatives, Barbara Flynn Currie, former majority leader. You ever thought that there would be a day when Mike Madigan would not have the gavel?
I knew it would happen someday, but I wasn't at all expecting it this year,
Yeah.
and I wasn't expecting it this way.
Yeah.
But I think he did such good work while he was there, as Speaker of the House as well as a member.
I think that depends on what party you belong to, right?
Well, I think the rules of the House, the way he operated, became much more democratic over time.
Yeah.
And I think that he was very concerned about coming up with public policies that are appropriate and responsive to the needs of the people.
Yeah. So
and he did. You have to say about him. You may say it depends on which party, but he worked closely with the governors of both parties all during his tenure. He did stumble when it came to Governor Rauner, because Governor Rauner was my way or the highway. But Mr. Madigan had equal trouble for different reasons with the Democratic governor, Rod Blagojevich.
And Gwen. Barbara Flynn Currie, thanks so much for joining us today. I'd love to have you come into studio, and I'd love to pick that brain. I hope you're writing a book someday soon.
I'll work on it. John, it's great to talk to you. Wonderful to be on the show. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks so much for coming on. Barbara Flynn Currie, former majority leader for the Democrat Party. I mean, like the number 2 person from the Democrat Party just joined the show. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like, what? How did you get Barbara Flynn Currie, first of all? And why are you having her on? Because one of the things about Black and White, I really want to start engaging with the other side.
I admire that in you, sir.
You know, because I think we need to start engaging with the other side to show the differences in how we and what we believe.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Black and White on AM 560 The Answer. I'm your host, John Anthony, with Bishop LaFleur. We'll be right back.